Good morning. Happy Friday. I've been watching someone, I guess, try to debate blue bacon on 18 USC 795. One of my favorite topics. I do enjoy it. And it got me thinking that the way blue bacon is attempting to reconstruct 18 USC 795 would actually be constitutionally void for not just violating the First Amendment, failing to pass the strict scrutiny test, which would require whatever actions that the government take to restrict speech to be the least restrictive method of achieving their goals, of preventing people from taking pictures of classified installations. And again, because I just want to make sure that everybody understands the difference between my reading of the statute and the associated executive order and Blue Bacon's. Blue Bacon's reading of it is that a base is an installation, and that the various heads of the Army, Navy, Air Force have marked or designated those bases as restricted areas, and therefore you can't film bases, you can't take pictures of bases, and you can't make sketches of bases, and you can't make graphs of bases or maps of bases, etc. My interpretation is somewhat different. My interpretation is that there are things that are classified as top secret, secret, or confidential. Restricted is no longer an accepted classification for information, and 18 USC 795 deals with the dissemination of information. Those things that are classified as top secret, secret, or confidential are located within bases, within being located far enough within the base, under enough protection, cover, inside buildings, behind walls, things like that, in such a fashion as to prevent the casual passersby from capturing said classified installations on their dash cams or cell phones, etc., requiring that the government actually pass another separate law forbidding people from using airplanes to circumvent the walls of military bases to capture images of the goings-on deep within them, because that, my friends, is the least restrictive method of being able to have something like a rocket test facility, which would require open air, etc. So that's his version versus my version. Now, my version is internally consistent. It is a violation of the First Amendment to parade a classified thing in front of people and expect people not to see it, draw it, sketch it, take photos of it, etc. It's the government's responsibility to protect that top secret, secret, or confidential information to prevent prying eyes from being able to see it. That's the government's job. And therefore, a gate or something else that can be seen from public, you're in no danger of being arrested, or you're in no danger, of being convicted for filming it or graphing it or drawing it or mapping it, because it is not confidential, top secret, or secret. Whereas in Blue Bacon's world, it's restricted, and therefore, if you do film it, you may be prosecuted for and convicted of violating 18 USC 795. Now, again, so I've already in the past talked about the First Amendment issue with that, because there is no locale within which said picture taking or said drawing, graphing, sketching, mapping takes place. You could literally, under Blue Bacon's misunderstanding of the law, you could be in violation of 18 USC 795 if you sit down at your kitchen table tonight in your own home and you draw a sketch of what you remember of a military gate that you once went through, which means it reaches everywhere to everyone at all times, because it applies to sketches. That's in the black letter law. It applies to sketches. And so it is subject to the strict scrutiny analysis. Strict scrutiny means that the government has to have a compelling government interest. And I personally don't think that preventing people from filming a gate is a compelling government interest, but I'm sure an MP whose job is to guard the base would probably think it is compelling. I don't believe it is. I've never seen a gate be referred to as any security measures like that be referred to as compelling government interests. Significant or important, perhaps, but not compelling. So that's failure number one. That's questionable, but that's my take on it. Failure number two is it has to be narrowly tailored and the least restricted method of achieving that compelling government interest. And that's the second way it fails. Because again, if they thought their gate was so precious, they could put another gate in front of it, blocking you from being able to see the gate. They don't want you to film. They could do that, and they don't. So it fails that First Amendment analysis. But what other constitutional questions, what other constitutional analyses might Blue Bacon's misunderstanding fail? The first one I thought of because of a question that someone posted in my Discord server. The first one is the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, because there is no enforcement of everybody who rolls through that gate with a dash cam. There is no enforcement against anybody who casually catches the gate in a family photo. If someone is going back to the base and they stop and they want to take a picture right outside the base with their girlfriend or whatever, a selfie, and they catch the gate in the background, there is no enforcement of it. The law is only enforced when it is a First Amendment auditor. And so that brings into question the equal protection laws of the United States, the 14th Amendment. Laws have to be applied equally. And you can't say, well, I don't like this guy's particular view of the First Amendment, that he wants to film things from public, and so I'm going to enforce this law against him, but I'm not going to enforce it against Joe Schmo, who just happens to catch the gate on his dash cam every day going in and out of the base. Do you understand the difference there? I mean, Joe Schmo with it on his dash cam, I mean, he might be posting that online every day. I mean, there are people who post strange videos of silly things that you wouldn't think anyone wants to watch, but they do it. I mean, I'm posting this right now. People post crazy things online. So definitely the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause is implicated if the law reads as Blue Bacon believes it does. And then finally, the other one that I've come up with is the void for vagueness doctrine. People have a right to know what is and is not illegal. It needs to be spelled out in such a way that the ordinary person can know that they are committing a crime by doing something. And under my interpretation of it, they would know, because they would have to have gone past all sorts of safety measures to get to where that classified installation is located. They would have had to gone through the gate, past the guards. They would have had to gone to the more restricted areas of the base, where they would have had to present security credentials, saying that they have whatever access credentials are required to see that confidential, secret, or top secret information. So under my theory, under my interpretation of the statute, it doesn't have any of these other implications. But under Blue Bacon's, it does, because how do we know? If you remember the map that he posted, it had the restricted area marked out, which included a visitor center and a restaurant. How does a person know that he could take a picture of that building or take a picture inside the restaurant, but he can't take a picture of the gate? The housing units were also within the restricted area, the on-base housing. How does a person know that they could take a picture of their neighbor's house, but not the building in the distance? if someone goes onto a base for an air show, obviously they're going to have permission from the base commander to take pictures of the planes. But under Blue Bacon's theory, and he has stated it in comments to someone else, the person doesn't have the right, they can't take pictures of, quote, the installation. Under Blue Bacon's definition, that means the base. So if a plane is diving low and he catches the con tower, you take a picture and you catch the control tower in that picture, have you violated 18 U.S.C. 795 or not? If the plane is not in the picture, did you violate it? If the con tower is in the center of the picture and the plane's slightly off to the side, have you violated it? If the con tower is off to the side and the plane is in the center, have you violated it? See, you don't know. You can't answer that question, and you're going to try to leave it to some MP who doesn't know his asshole from his elbow, who's going to think, well, fuck it. I am just going to arrest these people, and I'm going to let the courts sort it out. Well, that is too vague. Under Blue Bacon's misunderstanding of 18 U.S.C. 795, it is simply too vague for there to be any real application of it where an ordinary person such as myself or you could know exactly what is or isn't allowed to be photographed within that restricted area. Because again, according to Blue Bacon, it's not everything in there. Because he said, oh yeah, I mean, there's a difference between taking a picture of a tree that's in the restricted area versus the gate that's within the restricted area. Well, where is that written in the law, in the statute? How am I supposed to know by reading the statute that I can take a picture of a tree within the restricted area, but I can't take a picture of a gate within the restricted area? Because the law, the statute itself doesn't say anything about that. But again, the biggest flaw that Blue Bacon has is that installations have to be located within. The president was granted the authority to define, for the purposes of 18 U.S.C. 795, he was granted the authority to define what a vital military installation is. He was granted that authority, and he granted a portion of that authority to the various heads of the Departments of Defense, Army, Navy, Air Force, etc. And the president granted a portion of it to them. And the portion that he granted to them was to allow them to classify it. Now, the classifications have changed over time, but he only granted them the portion to classify it. He did not grant them the portion to change the subsequent part of his definition, which stated that the installation must be located within a base, a post, a ship, a Navy yard, etc. So he granted them the portion just to designate it, mark it, or classify it as one of the various levels of classification for intelligence, for information. Now, I do also want to point out that there was a previous executive order, 210104, and I think it's like 98 something. I don't remember exactly what that order is, but there's two changes between that earlier one, which was in like 1948, and the later one, which is 1950. The 1948 version had the Secretary of War, which was phased out. That position no longer existed, and it turned it into the Secretary of the Army, Secretary of the Navy, and the Secretary of the Air Force. I think they had the Secretary of War and the Secretary of Navy in the original version. Subsequent one split the Secretary of War into the Secretary of the Air Force and Secretary of the Army. Not a big change. But the big change that you should be aware of that should really activate the almonds is that in the original one, there were only 3 classifications: restricted, confidential, and secret. 2 years later, they had 4 classifications: restricted, confidential, secret, and top secret. Now, the reason why is because everything was in flux at this point. The Cold War was in full swing. We were either in or headed towards Korea. We needed to change the way our people were using classifications different in different portions of, for this executive order, there's only these 3 classifications, but in reality, they're using 4 classifications. So what do? Oh, well, let's change the executive order to make sure that it actually encompasses top secret stuff. It's a good idea. Let's go ahead and do that. But then realizing that they had classifications in different statutes and in different executive orders and in different regulations, it was being handled different. The system of classification was being handled different in all these different places. What the president did is the president made an executive order, I believe in 1951. I don't remember the executive order number, but that's when the president made a set standard for how classified information would be handled. And at some point later, the president restricted from that series of classifications. And so you got to remember that we are dealing with a statute that is targeting the dissemination of information. 18 U.S.C. 795 targets dissemination of information. It is designed to prevent dissemination of information. It's dealing with information. The classification system deals with information. It designates information as classified, or as top secret, secret, or confidential. It no longer designates information as restricted. Now, bases still restrict access to them, and that's fine. You know, this area is restricted to authorized personnel only. That doesn't mean that it is dealing with information, and that doesn't mean that it is a classification for information as per subsequent executive orders. Anyway, I'm rambling now. I love the subject. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.